Welcome, everyone. As you enter the workshop, please partake in the chat, introduce yourselves, let us know where you're from, what your role is, and one wonder you have about design thinking and AI. I hope everyone's having a good day. I know we're from all over the world here. For me, it's in the evening time, in Los Angeles. I know there's people here from the other side where we're approaching the AM of the day. So I appreciate you being here in your time zones. And I know it could be a long day, so I feel so, lucky to have you all here after a long day of work and life to talk about some exciting things about AI. So I really want to put some love out there and say how I appreciate you joining us on the call today. All right, everybody, as promised, 4:05, we're going to get this party started. We're going to move into some introductions and then get into the core content. Thank you for partaking in the chat. It was a pleasure to see everyone here today and what you're hoping to achieve by the end of this workshop. I want to start by introducing our mission, which is to onboard 1 million global educators into the world of emerging tech. And we do this in a variety of ways, whether it's through the coursework that we offer with our partners, through a global community of practice where we connect together on our mighty networks and share things we're excited about and things that we're learning about emerging tech, and also through research, where we look at different topics like what does it mean to be a teacher in this age and how does that teacher role evolve. So we're very excited to have you here and be able to engage with you in these various kinds of ways. And today our focus is going to be on design thinking and AI. Before we get into the core topic, a few more just kind of housekeeping things to share with you. As we host this webinar, let's please make sure to use that chat to treat each other with love and respect, and keep your mics off unless you are in the speaking mode and it's time to speak. And also to notify you that this session is currently being recorded. I look forward to seeing how the chat goes and how we use the collaborative tools we have in here today to hear from everybody that's present. All right, so leveraging AI and design thinking for educators. How are we translating how design thinking works in development of product for use in education in the classroom? And before we get into the topic, I want to take a moment to introduce Rick. Rick is here on behalf of Wakelet, who is our partner, and we use in all of our coursework to build portfolios. So I want to take a moment to pause here and have Rick tell you about what you're able to do on Wakelet and all the exciting opportunities on there. Welcome, Rick.
Thank you. Good morning, afternoon, evening to everyone all over the world. My name's Rick. I'm one of the co-founders and also focus on product and engineering at the company. So a quick overview of what Wakelet is for those that aren't familiar with it. Wakelet is a free platform that allows you to curate and organize any digital content you have online. So you could be looking at creating your resources that you're learning from design thinking, from AI, from these workshops, organized into a single collection and being able to publicly promote that on your own profile or even share it with others via one single link. And one of the greatest things is very, very visual platform. We've tried to make it as engaging as possible, being able to embed any content from videos from YouTube to PDFs, even embedding content from Spotify, for example. The great thing with the platform as well is being able to do that with other people. So being able to collaborate around a collection of content that you've organized and have other people contributing to that. And then being able to present that work, as I mentioned before, you can do it with just a single link, not having to share all those resources out with multiple links to multiple people. You can do it with one single one. And because it's visually beautiful, it shows off in the best possible way you can possibly think, really, because the creativity is all around you and we want to make it customizable for you. And one of the great things is we've got a URL on there, ed3dow.wakelet.com. If you sign up via that URL, you will receive 15% off the individual pro package. So as I mentioned before, it is a free platform, but we do also have a paid added extra features, and you'd be able to get 15% off of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. Thank you for introducing the platform and for giving everyone here a special advantage to experience the pro version. We have lots of fun working on Wakelet through our courses and a lot of cool ideas, whether it's you're using Wakelet as a space to keep all the things you're inspired by or things you want to go back to later as you're going through a course, as you're going through workshops. You know how like you'll attend something and all the materials will be kind of spread out everywhere from your bag to your computer to notes? I find it a very useful, format to put it in Wakelet and they'd be able to access it later in different categories. Some schools that we've been working with, they've used it for creating portfolios for people in high school, whether it's for college or career, but having their work samples there. Some of our project-based learning participants have used it to have exhibitions of learning where students share their portfolio of work during their celebrations of learning. So we found a lot of exciting use for it, especially for building community, sharing ideas, and keeping ourselves organized as well. So thank you, Rick, so much for providing this access for us and giving us such a toolkit for a variety of use. We really appreciate that.
Thank you.
All right, so a few things to keep in mind at the end of this session. So before the hour is up, we're going to give you a link so that you can fill in your information and get a certificate of attendance here. So I look forward to scanning that QR code at the end of the presentation. Just want to let people know so that you know at what point we'll be sharing that. And let's introduce the agenda. We're going to move through different topics today, starting with what is design thinking, and then conversing about the various concepts that are important to know in design thinking as we reframe it for the use in education. Then we'll start bringing in some AI tools for the various uses in the various phases as we go through that process. At the end, we'll leave some room for Q&A and finally end with the certificate of attendance. So with that being said, let's get into it. Design thinking as we know it, and maybe like me, most of you, when you were introduced to it, had this kind of, hexagon shape, right? And it came through starting with empathizing and leading through the different steps until you get to testing a product. I wanted to pause here and talk about the framing of design thinking before I start moving into education, acknowledging that some of us may be very new to design thinking, others of us may be using it in terms of design sprints, and there are even schools who use design thinking as their main framework. So I wanted to provide a little bit of a level setting so that we're all on the same page about what we mean when we say design thinking before I start bringing in AI tools for integration in the different parts of the process. So if you're new to design thinking or you've gone through this path, this is kind of the traditional way that we know design thinking to be. And what we're seeing in practice is that the process is evolving. And we're going into this double diamond depiction of what design thinking is, where the focus point is on problem and solutions as the ideas diverge and converge. And instead of looking at it in that kind of step-by-step process, they're starting to look at it through a more circular kind of quadrants process and more about asking questions and walking through the different inquiry styles in order to get to the answer of, what is the most viable solution, but the focus being on the process itself. So how can we take what we knew design thinking to be, mix that with how it is evolving and how we're starting to frame and think about design thinking, and apply that in a school setting? After some, discussion and ideation of what this means for educators and education, we came up with this idea of having gears, right? Because gears can go into different directions. And thinking of school environments, the school year, curriculum, having to work through standards and testing and the different, responsibilities we have, whether we're teachers or administrators, support, staff, whatever your your role may be in a school, there's so much that we have on our list to do. So how do we make a framework like this make sense in our classroom to use in a unit, throughout a semester, or throughout the whole year, depending on how you want to integrate these ideas. So we took a step back and said it's important to think of it as a process that can go in different directions. It's not necessarily a linear process. It is an iterative process where the more we gather data, the more information we find out about our user and their experiences, our problem statement, we continue to refine and really understand what we're solving for. Then we get to practice different iterations. Once we move towards solutions, we look to see what the most viable solution is. So here you see a few shifts from different design thinking platforms you probably came across. We added a discover stage. So let me explain why the discovery is so key in an educational environment. By using design thinking in classrooms, one of the challenges I found was that we would go quickly from empathizing to defining a problem, and there was a gap there. The gap was that it led to a lot of stereotypical thinking. So going from identifying our user and doing some empathy mapping, developing, thinking about who the persona is going to be, whether it's a learner, learners, our school, the community, right? Who we're solving for, what we're solving for. There was this step where we missed, and it would lead to this jumping to a conclusion or like illogical fallacies about people's identities and group identities, and went straight into profiling people. So we paused and to take a step back and say, how can we know people more authentically? How can we empathize with people to go beyond what they say, what they feel, what their frustrations are, what they're inspired by, to really understand the roles they play, the challenges they face, and what opportunities there are to improve their life experiences. So that's why we added the discover piece. Next, we have the middle gear, the ideating and prototyping. So in the traditional view, these are two kind of separated parts, separated phases. We're representing it as a combined phase because we want us to think about the relationship between having an idea and starting to prototype solutions for it. Because in design thinking, that prototyping is rapid prototyping, right? We're testing out different possible solutions, what might be the most viable product. We're gathering data from the user, then we're making it go back to ideation and sometimes even back to the problem statement as we gather the data to build the best possible solution and test that solution. So we see ideation and prototyping more hand in hand. And then after that comes testing and evaluating. And the reason we want to emphasize evaluation there is to really focus on the concept of reflection. So as we test our products, how do we gather the information and the data, the evaluation, and make sense of that to then go back and inform the products that we're developing, the solutions that we're developing. At the end comes the creating of the product. So some places don't really have, some schools or organizations don't really talk about that final product. Some don't get to the final product. But thinking about an educational environment, I think it's crucial to have that conversation of, do we then take these solutions and share? Where do the assessments come in? And I think that's a key place where we can talk about building the most viable product and incorporating that in our celebrations of learning, in our exhibitions, and testing it with a wider group and a wider public to see how our solutions impact community as well. With that being said, I want to dive into these concepts of diverging and converging and what that and make sense of it within the educational context as well. So in general, as we start out in our design thinking process, there's a lot of divergent thinking that takes place. That means it's open-ended, there are no no's, right? It's a lot like improv, like we say yes and we keep this ever-flowing kind of concepts that are let's say, giving us a lot of choices to think about, right? So you get to be creative, it's open-ended, we're exploring. Then as we move through design thinking, our ideas start to converge. They start to go towards more of a solution. And there you're seeing more systematic behaviors. So when we look at design thinking, we see a lot of diverging happening as we discover and move through from empathizing to ideation. And then it starts to converge into solving that problem, into prototypes, testing, and producing the final product. So that's why we came up with these gears to bring in all these concepts. Design thinking is evolving, and we have so many things to think about as educators of how does this fit in the world of how we have to make sense of standards and assessments and curriculum. And so we came up with this moving gear system to show us how ideas diverge and converge in order to make sense of what our users really need. And the first step of doing that is empathy. So I hope this level setting kind of brought us to the same place and the same definition of what design thinking is, what it's evolving to, and how we can reimagine it for education. One of the key things I really want to share with everybody and emphasize is that beyond it being a process, it's really important to consider how there are important characteristics and mindsets that we need to embrace as we bring design thinking, alive into our classroom. Whether you're going to do a design sprint and have it for a unit, or use it for longer terms in your, classroom or school practice, here are some 5 major things to keep in mind. Maintaining a curiosity, having a bias towards thoughtful action, continuing to reframe the problem and think of things differently, not being stuck in one kind of thinking, being aware of the individual and the group, and also radical collaboration. So as I was thinking through this, I thought what a great way would be to keep these 5, mindsets in our mind as we go through this experience together, this workshop. We can actually embrace radical collaboration. And in order to exemplify that, we created this whiteboard. And it's our first kind of feature for how to integrate AI into the classroom. We wanted to make sure that whether you're new to AI or you've been using AI for a while and you're looking for new creative and different ideas and you're a more advanced user, we wanted you to have the opportunity to have a few ideas to take with you and put into practice, as soon as tomorrow. So we're going to start out with some sorting features of AI that Canva has. And for us to have some radical collaboration going through this workshop, we're going to put a link in the chat soon that you can actually practice this sorting feature. What I actually did is took an existing template in Canva. So if you type design thinking in Canva, it'll bring up this kind of template that has 4 quadrants. What I did is I took that and made it make more sense to what the workshop is today, going through the different parts of the process of design thinking, so that as we go, the people who are here, you can go into the Canva, write some ideas about every phase, whether it's something I'm sharing with you, an inspiration you might have as we talk about it, or an idea that appears in your mind, a practice that you've already been using that you want to share with people. And hopefully by the end of the workshop, we'll have this collated, collaborative whiteboard of ideas of how to integrate AI in the classroom. And you already have the link to that. So I'm looking forward to see what your ideas are going to be, and how you're going to, what you really think of the auto sort feature, and perhaps, the ways you can utilize this with your learners. And I'll start by thinking through how we can use this whiteboard feature and the auto sort with our students in design thinking. So let's kick it off with bringing in the next part about empathy. So going through building the persona, I thought about a particular learner. So in the traditional sense of design thinking, you're thinking about a user or a group of user. For us in the education system, we can think about our learners, we can think about a group of learners, we can think of different groups of stakeholders that we have. and the problems and that we're trying to solve for by first starting with empathy, trying to understand the users themselves, whether they're singular or in groups. So I decided to go with the persona of Curious Carla. I chose to focus on one individual user, or in our case, learner, and develop their persona. I used the whiteboard to take quick notes about the things that I remembered about Curious Carla, whose name was not Carla. I just put it together because I wanted the CC, the Curious and the Carla. So this is our user, and I thought about the age, where they are, their occupation, their family, like all the different components that impact their identity. I thought about describing them, and I started to list those things, and their possible influences, aspirations, interests, motivations, their pain points, their frustrations, and what their expectations and needs are in life. So that was my starting point before I started the empathy mapping. And the whiteboard was super helpful to me because I just started writing little post-its everywhere. Then when I auto sorted it, it helped me put it into these different categories and organize that information. So I started off with creating this persona on my own, and then I started to have a conversation with Perplexity AI and Claude AI to build the persona a bit more, right? To help me imagine the world that Curious Carla is living in. Once I did that, then I started to do the empathy mapping. The empathy mapping is more about the quadrants of what does this person hear? What do they say or do? And that helps us inform, what their goals might be, what the learner's goals are. I take that to the next level. So going into the discover phase, right before we get to defining the problem, I wanted to add this additional layer to it. I had talked about earlier how we had added discover, and it's not a part of the traditional design thinking process for schools. And because I, was being very careful to not jump into stereotyping of the learner or the user and the persona. So by moving into discover phase, we find out what their roles are in life, what kind of problems they're facing, and then potential opportunities that they'll have. I see a question in the chat. Did the AI sort into the quadrants? You can sort it into the quadrants if you select the auto sort feature. It'll group the post-its together. And you can choose in different categories, whether it's by the person, by the color, by the topic. So yeah, it could do that. But if you choose the original Canva template, it'll be in a quadrant setting. What I did is I added more for the design thinking purposes. I already see some people using our template. That's very exciting. I'm curious to see, what we come up with towards the end. Thank you for utilizing that Canva template. All right, so I'm going to jump back in. I took a pause there, a little detour there. I wanted to share these two components because the next AI feature, which is a little bit more advanced than, chatting with the LLM, prompting an LLM, or, using an AI sort feature, it's actually to bring this persona to life. So I thought, how can I really help myself understand this individual, this persona, and why not build a chatbot that I can have a conversation with? So I took all this information. I took the persona, I took the empathy mapping and the discovery stage, and I input it into Chip AI. I chose Chip AI because it's free. And of course, it has pro versions, but there's a freemium to it. And I used all the information that I had gathered to build a Curious Carla chatbot and to have a conversation with it. I found it super helpful because it helped me think about things that I didn't before, like, what are some things that Carla would want me to know about them that I didn't think about before? And in this way, even though I don't have this person in front of me, I don't have the user in front of me, I could still go through interviewing and practicing interviewing with AI. So let's say if you're preparing learners to use, design thinking in the classroom and you're at a stage where they're going to interview, this can be really good prep before they actually conduct an interview to form their questions and figure out what they really want to get out of that interview, what they want to learn about their user. So that's one idea. There are other chatbots that you can build from different AIs. I know ChatGPT has a function as well, but I think that's the premium version on Explore AI, so that's why I didn't build the example there, and I left it at Chip AI for us. Okay, so that's one use for us there. Combining, empathizing and discovery together, you can build your persona in an AI and have those conversations. It might be even cool to have a whole library of different personas and allow learners to practice conversing, interviewing, and finding more data, more information in the discovery stage about their persona. So that's one idea. I'm going to move into the next one. It's going to get a little bit more complicated each time. I wanted to make sure I had a little bit of variety of the different types of AI you can use, so everyone gets something out of this experience. So I went into Claude AI. So moving into the next stage for defining the problem, I was thinking to myself, like, what are ways AI can help us define a problem? So the first natural thought was, well, I can chat with the LLM of my choice, and I can ask it to refine something or make it better. And then I thought, what if I were to make an app? So I went on Claude and I made an app, and it wasn't my favorite. I was like, what if I were to make a simulator? And after trying the app, the simulator, and the chatbot, and because I didn't want to repeat the chatbot idea from before, I actually came to think that the simulator was the most interesting use for the problem statement development, because you can give it a set of different examples and it could help you think through the definition stage. So it built this whole simulator for me. And then I was able to converse and have a conversation to see what's going to impact this persona and how I can develop an effective problem statement. Keeping in mind that this is an iterative process, I know it's not going to be my final problem statement, but it's definitely helpful to have a partner to think with, and using AI as a thought partner and revising those problem statements. The key things to provide as you're training it was a template for problem statements. So the one I used was, who needs a way to do what, because, or so, why. And then I added some example statements to train it. And eventually I gave it some framework for evaluation, because if I want the simulator to evaluate the problem statement I give, then you have to give it parameters, right? And giving it a framework gives it a more solid, understanding of what you're looking for. So I thought this was a really fun way of developing a problem statement that goes beyond, using an LLM and making it as conversational. Of course, you have that option. You can go on any of the LLMs and refine and ask it to, make it better, give it more boundaries, give it more parameters. But this was a different way to think about it. And I would use this, you could use this with, your colleagues as you come up with different problem statements. You can actually use this with learners as well, and have them practice and refine their problem statements before they meet with you and, define the problem. So I think it's a really good scaffolding tool, right? Especially if you do like blended learning or have different kind of stations available, that by the time they're ready to come and have a conversation with you, they've had a few different opportunities to refine their problem statements until they get to you to kind of finalize it for that point, not forever, right? Because we're gonna develop and prototype a little bit, we're gonna ideate, and we might revisit it later. But I thought this simulator would be an awesome way to have those conversations and practice refining the problem statement. All right. Next up, we have prototyping. So this is I think one of the more complex uses of AI. So at this point, we're combining different kind of tools to build a 3D product, starting with coding in ChatGPT, moving into Blender to put the initial set of code for the 3D image, and then bringing that into Tinkercad in order to choose the type of 3D formation you want to have. So this is one of our course developers walking us through the use of Tinkercad, and you can see the 3D formation of a product. And of course, in design thinking, sometimes the products are, 3D, sometimes it could be digital, other times it's in person, right? There are different kinds of products you can have and solutions you can have in design thinking. So these are just kind of some of the ways to think about incorporating AI into that process. So here's the last part, bringing it into Tinkercad, bringing in that final file, and being able to have more control over the parameters of that 3D product. So say, for example, you don't have the physical products or you really want to use, tech in order to share their ideas. This is definitely a use case where you can bring in AI for rapid prototyping. Or even towards the final stages, as you want to have a 3D product, you can use it in this space to render it. All right. I didn't want to use this first because I know it's a little like if you're just starting to use AI, I didn't want to make it scary. I wanted to start, slowly and give some ideas. But also for those of you who've been using AI for a long time and you're looking to push the boundaries and go to a more advanced level, I wanted to give you some options as well. All right. Here's another cool tool. So this has become one of my recent favorites. This is Wizard.io. And this demo shows all the different kinds of digital products it could help perform. They have templates, a plethora of them, that learners can use to build apps, websites, and different kinds of digital products like that. And they can also start from their existing kind of ideas and sketches. So here you can see all the different ways they can customize their apps or their websites. There's plenty of choices. And there's also like AI functions within the format. It does have a freemium version. The pro version, of course, gives you a little bit more capabilities, but they can do so much on the free version as well to show what their idea is. The next recording, I found this to be super cool. So say they have an example like, oh, I want my website to look like this website. They can take a picture of the website, upload it into Wizard, and Wizard will use that as a prototype to build out their app or their website. Another cool feature they have, so that was that example. Here's another cool feature. Let's say they're, in their groups working, they developed this sketch prototype, and this is their sketch. We want our website to look like this. They can take a picture of that and ask Wizard to generate that prototype. I thought that was super cool. Because you're taking it from sketching into putting it into a AI and creating a digital product for it. So there's a lot to do here. I spent many hours just playing around on their site. Check it out, see how you can find use of it as you're building digital products as well. All right. I want to be conscious of our time and leave time for questions at the end. So I'm trying to balance, the amount of information. I want to make sure it's not too didactic, but also you have information you can put into practice. So let's take a pause from AI for a second here and talk about the iterative nature, the process that is non-linear, right? I thought this was a really good depiction of how we go through these. I keep saying phases, right? But I'm going to say, I think it's more so the parts of the process. I think it's really important to use that word, especially with learners as well, to keep emphasizing this is a process. And most importantly, this is a iterative process. So yes, we define the problem by using empathy, but as we go through prototyping and testing and evaluating our rapid prototypes, we gather information. As we gather that information, it's going to help inform our problem statement and help us even understand our users to a whole other level and a whole other level of empathy, because now we're walking in their shoes. So I just wanted to take a pause break here between the AIs to say, at this point, we're talking about ideation and prototyping, and this is not like the next stage is just going to be over. We need to think of this as the gears turning. It is a non-linear process, and we're going to keep informing that problem statement. We're going to keep understanding more about our learner, our persona, our user. I'm using these words interchangeably, but what it's going to do is this whole process is going to help us understand what they need, and then what we can use in our toolbox, in our toolkit, to help solve the challenges and the problems that they are facing. With that being said, let's move on to the next idea. I've kind of been, obsessed with this tool lately. This is the only repeat I've had in all of our workshops of an AI tool, but really I wanted to emphasize like there are different uses of the same AI. By the time you get to the testing and evaluation space, I think it's really important to emphasize the importance of communication, right? Because you need to be able to persuade your audience to make your point clearly. And I think Udly AI really creates this opportunity for learners to practice those presentations, to practice pitching their prototypes to the group. So say if you have a whole class who's prototyping, for the same problem, then you'll want to have them prepare for making that pitch and presentation. It's almost like a friendly competition we have going of what the possible viable solutions can be. So before we get to that point, the first person that they practice with shouldn't be in that group setting. I think it would be very nice to have station kind of rotation again to pitch their, most viable solution, to pitch a prototyping solution. And what this AI will do is give them feedback on their communication skills, what their strengths are, what they need to improve. And even before this stage, you could have this conversation back and forth with the AI of what you're hoping to achieve with the presentation. And it gives it suggestions that way. It tries to understand, what we want to achieve through a presentation, then gives us commentary on how we could be better, how we can be more persuasive, how can we be better communicators in general. So it's the only reason why I wanted to repeat it from our workshops, especially if there are new people joining us who have not heard of this yet. I wanted to drop that in our conversation to use Udly AI for communication. It's really important to have some kind of a feedback compass, some kind of a system when they're pitching these ideas. And I think this is one of the, exciting way to organize that information. So thinking about the things that worked well, um, what new wonders came through as they were testing their prototypes, what needs to improve, and any new ideas they had, right? You can use AI to track this. You can use this also with Udly and say, these are the things I'm looking for as you're conversing with it after you present. This can be a class, pitch opportunity as well, where we're pitching to the class and everybody else gives us feedback before we get to the most viable solution. So I want to make sure to pause there and talk about reflection, whether you want to put this and say, this is my framework for feedback, and you put that in an LLM and have a conversation, or maybe you try building a simulator yourself and say, I want a feedback compass simulation, Claude. Would you build it based on these parameters? Here are the 4 key aspects I want you to focus on, as I present my ideas. All right. Next up, I thought a lot about what the final viable solution can be built with. And because there's such a variety of the different kind of products and solutions there can be, I thought to share this directory instead. So this directory is what can AI do today? And the cool thing about this that it stands out is that you can actually type the function that you want to achieve, right? The capability, the skill that the AI, is able to do, and find different kind of AI to test out to build that product. And I think that's super helpful. So here's my example. I'm like, I want an AI for prototyping. Give me some ideas. And it provides this whole list and range of ideas. You can choose, free ones, pro ones. There's a whole variety. And then when you click on it, which I'm going to show for you shortly, when you click on it, it gives you the lowdown on what is Figma, who should be using it, what type of AI is it, and then it gives you alternatives to it as well. So as you're thinking through products, I think this is a cool way to think through it. One of the conversations we have about AI is how can you build a future, proof toolkit, AI toolkit. And I think this site really helps the conversation because it's not focusing on brand, it's focusing on capabilities. And the example I always give is I was the biggest believer in Google, expeditions, and then they decided not to do it anymore. And I had all the cardboard, stuff and for my classroom to put the VR in, and you could be into the body of the bee or see how a heart works. And I was so into it, they decided not to support the app anymore. So what do? Well, in our case, if we have an adaptable toolbox, we don't just have that as the only choice. We have a whole list of different AI that have the same capability that we can utilize. So that is the message I'm kind of the end note I want to end on as we think about the different AI that's available is keeping that adaptable mindset of what's out there and how it's changing because it's happening quickly, right? There's so many different kinds of tech out there and it's evolving quickly. So I just want to put out there to our mindsets are super important around it. In the chat, I see what is the site called? It is What Can AI Do Today? It's exactly those words in site. Awesome. So, and that's building a future-proof, toolbox for AI is to have that adaptable mindset. So really thinking about, our relationship with AI is we're experimenters, right? We're here to see what kind of tools are available, how can we use them best in our classrooms, how can we test it out, and some things to keep in mind there are to make sure that, when we're actually utilizing AI with learners, that it's with, learners over the age of 13, when we're choosing AI to make sure that they have a robust security and privacy measures already built into them, like Perplexity and Notebook LM do. So that's very important to consider whenever you're thinking about using it with learners. And then thinking in terms of pedagogy, right? Like how are we creating learning experiences that are very engaging and deepen our understanding about the topics and the learning experiences that we have for our learners. Another really helpful tool we have is Reedy, our CEO, has built in a combination of the UNESCO AI literacy standards, their competencies, and added a few of ours that are important to us to consider in this conversation of AI. So I put a QR scan code over there, and it takes you to our site where we have the whole list of the UNESCO AI competencies, and we've added some of the ones that we think are very critical to have there as well in terms of, how we are integrating AI into classrooms. And then I know a lot of us in the classroom, when we're using things, we need to put those standards. So it gives us that measure of, in addition to the subject standards that we have, we can put our AI literacy standards that we're, using. All right. So this is where I'm going to pause. We're good on time. I just want to take a step back. I just gave a bunch of information. I'm hoping that people are using that whiteboard collaboratively, and give an opportunity for people to turn on their mics and reflect on the topic with the sentence, I used to think, now I think. I would love to hear from a few of you who are here. What are some insights you've gained through this? How has it impacted your thinking? Yeah, I would love to hear from you, whether it's in the chat or on speaker, but feel free to unmute yourselves, and Kim will help us with that if you need any kind of access there. Would love to hear from a few of you.
I have a
Oh,
question. This
yes,
is Contessa. I have a question. So I'm very curious about the simulation that you made, because I never thought about creating something like that, especially when you're working with problem statements. And I wonder if you can kind of go over that again and how you were able to create that.
Sure. Yeah, I went into Claude AI, and I started to have a conversation with it. And I said, Claude, I need to build some kind of system to revise problem statements, within the context of design thinking to use in my classroom. So I asked it to, and I said, can you build me a simulator? And it said, yes. I said, great. I said, here are the parameters. So there's three pieces of information I shared. The template of how I wanted to organize the sentence, the problem statement. Then I gave the information on what are some examples of what a problem statement is, because I wanted to have a good set of examples of what I'm defining as an effective problem statement. And then the third thing I gave it was the framework to to refine the statement. So what's the criteria, right, that I want them to go off of to evaluate the problem statement? So I trained it that way, and I said, this is how I want you to build the simulator. And then everything else, it coded on its own and developed that simulator for me.
That is so fascinating. Sometimes I think we overthink how to use and work with AI when all you did was ask, hey, can you do this for me? And they said, absolutely.
That's exactly it, Contessa. And I think as educators, like those are skills we have like built in us, right? It's we know how to determine, how to help somebody. We know how to keep asking clarifying questions. We even know how to deal with how it hallucinates, right? Like sometimes the students, check out and you're like re-engaging them. So I think we have this natural skill set. And that's exactly what I did. I was like, let me just ask it what it's able to do. I was like, can you build an app? Can you build a chatbot? Can you, and it told me what it was able to do. And then I tested it. I said, okay, let's experiment. Show me what you can do. And then I get to decide, is this a product I want to use? Is this a simulator that's going to be helpful for me to use in the classroom, for me to share with educators? So ultimately, I'm the one who decides, right, the output. And that's a really critical part of like using any AI is having that critical mindset at the end and saying, is this reliable? Is this a good way of using this platform? And we get to be the deciders of that. Thank you for sharing that, Contessa. I hope you try it out. I really do.
I
We have
absolutely will. Like as soon as we get off of here, I'm going to try it out.
awesome.
Thank you.
Awesome. Yeah. And then I don't know if you're part of Mighty yet, but feel free to join us on Mighty Networks. I'm going to put the QR code soon and share with us. Show us what you came up with. And then I can share mine as well. I still have the link to that one, so I'm happy to share as well. Tina, thank you for sharing in the chat. You wrote, I used to think that AI was used for text support, but now I know it can be used for simulators that can be a back and forth conversation to provide feedback. Yep, for sure. And I think that's that's why we talk so much about the AI mindset is we're experimenters, right? All of this is new and is changing quickly. And the whole point is we just keep trying stuff. And then we learn cool stuff and we share it with each other. That's kind of where my mind's at. We're explorers. All right, if there are no other questions, let's move on to wrapping it up for the evening. We have some fun information to share, no matter what your role is. We have a lot of different courses on getting started with AI and different, pedagogical frameworks. So like we have project-based learning in AI. We have our design thinking one and AI. You're welcome to join us where our partners are and our partnering universities. And we're offering a $200 credit, which will cover a whole course. And you're welcome to see how we're thinking about AI in a more in-depth manner. Like today, what I gave you is a very brief, like very quick preview of what you actually get in a course that's, 8 modules long, and each module is about 5 to 5.5 hours. We're just giving you like this very short introduction to the things you'll experience. Like in the course, we go into much more depth about, what the method is, what the frameworks are, how to build something. This is meant to be just what is possible and start that conversation. So feel free to take any of our courses on there. And if you have any questions, email us and we'll get back to you. And of course, join our Mighty Network and let's keep the conversation going there.